Hi everyone, we're here today with Dr. Rique Campa, professor in the Department of Fisheries and Wildlife, and I'm going to let him introduce himself and then we'll ask him a few questions.
Hi, FW 101. My name is Rique Campa. I'm a professor in the Department of Fisheries and Wildlife here at Michigan State University. I'm a wildlife ecology professor, and I'm also an associate dean in the graduate school. And what an associate dean in the graduate school does, at least what I do, is I oversee the implementation and evaluation of some career professional development for graduate students and postdocs.
Great. So if you don't mind, if you could tell us a little bit about teaching and research that you do for Fisheries and Wildlife.
Yeah, thanks, Jerry. So one of the courses I teach is FW 101. I usually teach it in the fall semester. I think it's a fun class to teach because it's getting kind of the next generation of natural resources professionals, but also a lot of other people that are interested in conserving our natural resources, or just interested in maybe learning more about our natural resources, specifically, fisheries, wildlife, and aquatic resources. Some of the types of research, the other courses I teach, a FW 410. It's called Upland Ecosystem Management. It's a junior, senior level class. Most of it is fisheries and wildlife majors, but I would encourage other folks to take it. I frequently have foresters take it, people in even in environmental engineering, plant biology. There's a range of folks, Lyman Briggs, environmental science folks take it. It's really great to have a diversity of folks in there because different people bring different expertise and interest into the class. Some of the type of research I do, most of it pertains to looking at the effects of disturbances or management practices on wildlife species, communities, or habitat suitability or potential. And just like the course I teach, Upland Ecosystem Management, most of the research I do deals with more upland ecosystems, specifically forested or grassland systems. Nowadays, mostly forested systems. And a big chunk of the work that I'm currently doing, a lot of it deals with projects related to Michigan's elk herd. So some of you may not know, Michigan has probably the second largest elk herd east of the Mississippi River. And we've had basically more than 100 years of elk conservation led by the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. And then I also do a lot of deer work and work with endangered and threatened species like eastern Massasauga rattlesnakes.
Out of curiosity, where is the largest elk herd east of the Mississippi?
Oh, good question, Jerry. So Michigan used to have it, but a few years ago, actually quite a few years ago now, Kentucky did a really, really big introduction, and they started their introduction with, it was a lot of animals that they brought in from different states, and they just exploded in numbers, almost probably larger numbers than they had even anticipated. In some case, those animals moved to some of the adjoining states, which some of their biologists weren't real happy about. But Michigan is the only state east of the Mississippi that's had a sustained elk hunting season, at least one per year since 1984. So that's I think a good testament for the program that the DNR has had.
So what initially got you started in this? What made you interested in biology and fisheries and wildlife?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jerry. I think maybe I'll answer your question by kind of ending with a recommendation that that if I had to do my education all over again, and knowing what I know now, would I do things differently? And, I don't think I would, other than maybe study harder my freshman year in college. I think I made a good decision for me to major in fisheries and wildlife management when I was an undergraduate. I got my undergraduate degree at the University of Missouri in Columbia in wildlife management. And then my graduate degrees are in wildlife ecology. And I think the thing that got me started is, I was a city kid. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and didn't necessarily like living in the city, but I got real active in scouting. Spent a lot of time backpacking and camping and hiking and spending time in the outdoors. I started bass fishing and fly fishing at a very, very young age. Remember fly fishing, sitting on my dad's shoulders out in the stream using a fly rod so my back cast wouldn't hit the bank. And I started hunting at a young age too. And I just really liked being out in the outdoors, observing animals, catching fish, and I just knew that if there was an occupation, I wanted to work in the outdoors like that. And almost by surprise, I met some people in the Missouri Department of Conservation, actually a person by the name of Bill Crawford, who was in charge of Missouri Department's conservation of their research division. I met him when I was a high school senior. And when I started school in Columbia, I went back and kind of reintroduced myself and stayed in contact with him. And after begging him for 2 years to hire me, finally hired me, as a student worker. And from there, it just took right off. So.
Yeah, and I see, a theme when I've been talking to other people. You don't always know where you're going, but if you pursue things that are your passion, it really gives you a leg up because you'll always be excited and passionate about the issues that you're studying. So speaking of issues, one of the questions I've been posing to everybody is what they feel the most important issue or issues are in the discipline today.
Yeah, that's a good question. Jerry, and as you know, we could talk for hours on that one question. I think based on my area of research and some of my favorite issues in teaching, a lot of my research deals with wildlife habitat relationships, and I think the habitat part of the research, I think, is a big issue, and specifically land use issues. I think society has a lot of interest in, conserving our natural resources, using our natural resources, but by the same point, there's a lot of activities that you can just look in the news on any given day and see issues of how land issues are conflicting, with conservation goals, and not just in Michigan, but nationally and globally. And I think to some degree, us not taking what Aldo Leopold would have called a land ethic, are abusing the land, conserving our natural resources, is to some degree has caught up with us. And I think the challenge with future natural resources professionals, whether they're fisheries biologists, wildlife biologists, foresters, aquatic ecologists, is going to be, the effects of how do we mitigate, lessen the impact of some of these land use issues, but still conserve our natural resources for diverse interests.
Yeah, as a tropical ecologist myself,
Mhm.
The land use impacts are just, the major driver of change
Yeah,
in Latin America, where I do my
yeah,
research. And um, in my intro bio class, I always have students look at historically what were the major causes of species loss, at present
hmm
what are they, and in the future what will they be.
hmm
And habitat loss really, and habitat conversion right now is probably the number one
hmm
issue. And we look toward the future where we think climate change will start to play a bigger role, but in places where land is being cleared and land is being changed pretty radically, it has devastating impacts on our ability to manage and conserve natural resources. So you hinted upon one bit of advice you'd have for fisheries and wildlife students, and that was to study harder your first year. And it is, really important to, put yourself on a trajectory in your first year. But what other things would you have as advice for our new FW students and potential FW students?
Yeah, it's a good question, Jerry. Nobody ever told me that, but I think some of the things that that happened to me or that I did kind of by mistake was, and I was a very much an introvert when I was a college freshman, is to get yourself out there and introduce yourself to people in natural resources fields. Talk to them about what they do. Ask them about what they do. Meet as many people in the discipline as possible, and volunteer and try to get work experiences to find out what you like and what you don't like. I was persistent for 2 years to try to get Bill Crawford of Missouri Department of Conservation to hire me, and I finally wore him down, or I'm not sure why he hired me, but he did, and that had a profound effect on how I looked at my education and the education trajectory, but also the diversity of things that I learned, working for professionals in an agency, the things that you just can't learn in the classroom. And so I would take every opportunity to network with professionals, and then look for diverse work opportunities, whether they're paid or volunteer, to learn new skills that you can leverage to get further positions, but also to put on your resume to make yourself more marketable. And I think through those experiences, you'll start to narrow down things that you want to do in the future, or maybe things you don't want to do in the future.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the interview, Dr. Campa. Um, and hopefully students will stick around and take your 410 class in the future. And I've heard lots of good things about the course, but also that it's a really, you learn so many really important concepts in those upper level courses. And 410 is one I've heard a lot of really good things about. Do you have any last parting words you'd like to share with the students?
I don't, Dr. Urquhart. The only thing is please offer up my email address if there's any of your students that would like to follow up with other questions, or have a one-on-one Zoom meeting later in the summer or even the fall. I'd be happy to sit down and talk with them.
Well, great. I will do that. Thank you.